My sister couldn't accept my breakup with my toxic ex and started a relationship with his brother just to keep him in the family. When I started dating my brother's best friend, I honestly thought it was just going to be a high school thing that faded out like everything else from that time in my life. We were teenagers, we were bored, and we spent way too many weekends in my parents' living room pretending that our little town was not the most predictable place on the planet. It felt natural, almost lazy, to slide from hanging out in a group to having this guy start saving a seat next to me on the couch, stealing my fries, and texting me late at night about songs he thought I would like. It did not feel like some epic love story. It felt like convenience mixed with hormones and just enough genuine connection to make it feel safe instead of reckless. The timing was ridiculous, though, because my brother thought it was the coolest thing ever, and my parents got this weird glow in their eyes like they were already planning a wedding before I had even called it a relationship out loud. I was 16, still figuring out how to drive without sweating through my shirt, and suddenly people were talking about forever like I had signed something already. At first it was flattering, in that annoying way where adults confuse your complete lack of experience with maturity just because you are not sneaking out or failing classes. I was good at school, I came home on time, and now I had a boyfriend who everybody already liked. It made my family feel smug, like they had done something right. The thing is, he really was a good guy back then. He helped my brother move furniture, he shoveled my parents' driveway without being asked, and he would sit on the floor and play games with my little cousins during holidays. He made my mother laugh, and he listened when my father started talking about life lessons. When we were alone, he was sweet in that clumsy teenage way, always slightly too intense and slightly too hopeful, talking about how we could move to some bigger city together after graduation and get an apartment with a terrible view that we would love anyway. Back then, that kind of talk felt like a game. I nodded along, I said things like, yeah, maybe. But in my head, it was all hypothetical, like talking about moving to the moon. We dated for almost 2 years through all the usual teenage drama, school events, and those long nights where you think staying up texting until 3 in the morning means you are soulmates. My brother loved having his best friend around even more because now there was a convenient excuse for him to be at our house constantly. My parents treated him like an extra child, which was a blessing and a curse, because it meant they trusted him, but also meant they watched our relationship like it was some kind of joint project. My middle sister, though, she reacted differently from the very beginning. She acted like she had been personally left out of a group chat that everyone else was in, and instead of saying she was hurt, she just made constant little comments about how cute we were and how meant to be we seemed. I did not think anything of it at first. My middle sister has this habit of turning everything into a story where she is in the front row, center of the frame, even when it is not actually about her. She jumped in with extra enthusiasm when we hit relationship milestones, sending us dramatic text messages, taking pictures of us without asking, and posting them on a social media app with captions about true love and childhood sweethearts, as if that was not putting a ridiculous amount of pressure on 2 teenagers who could barely decide what to order on a menu. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself she was just being extra, the way she always had been. The proposal, though, that was where everything snapped into focus. We had just graduated, I was barely out of high school, and we were at this small dinner with both our families, just celebrating the fact that we survived exams. I thought it was going to be a normal evening with bad appetizers and too many stories about how I used to mispronounce words as a kid. Instead, he stood up halfway through dessert and tapped his glass like we were in some movie. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I was going to be sick right there next to the mashed potatoes. He started talking about how long we had been together, how much he loved me, how he could not imagine his life without me, all the greatest hits. I remember staring at him thinking, please, please do not do this. Do not do this right now. Not like this. Not at this age. Not with my mother already crying before he even reached into his pocket. I felt like the whole room was closing in on me. My brother had this huge grin on his face. My father looked proud, and my middle sister had both hands clasped under her chin like she was watching her favorite show. When he got down on one knee and opened the little box with the ring in it, there was this loud buzzing in my ears that made it hard to hear him. I saw his mouth moving, and then I realized everyone was looking at me. Waiting? Because of course they were. It was my turn to play my part. I said no. I did not say it dramatically. I did not stand up and shout. I just sat there, frozen for a second, and then quietly said that I loved him, but I was not ready to get married. The room went silent in that heavy, choking way, where even the sound of someone putting down a fork feels offensive. His face did this strange thing, like he was trying to keep smiling while everything behind his eyes was collapsing. My mother gasped like I had slapped her. My father just stared at me. My brother looked like he had swallowed something wrong. My middle sister, though, she looked offended. Not sad. Not concerned, actually offended, as if I had just ruined her favorite scene. After that night, nothing was simple. My parents pulled me into the kitchen later and tried to have this reasonable conversation that was not reasonable at all, because it was built on the assumption that what I had done was obviously wrong. They kept asking why, as if I am 18 and do not want to commit to a legal contract with someone yet, was not enough of an answer. My mother tried the guilt angle, talking about how many women would be grateful to have someone so devoted, how many people never find a love like that. My father stayed mostly quiet, but I could tell he thought I was being childish. My brother avoided me for a few days, then came around slowly, with this heavy disappointment between us that never fully disappeared. My middle sister went full theater. She called me dramatic for rejecting him, which was hilarious considering she cried more than he did. She called him the one that got away before he had even officially left. She told me that some people wait their whole lives for stability like that I was lucky, that I was being selfish. She kept saying we were perfect together, like she had access to some deeper truth that I was ignoring. At one point, she even suggested that maybe I could accept the proposal and just have a long engagement, as if promising to marry someone eventually counted as a compromise. He and I tried to keep dating for a little while after that, because it felt easier than ripping the bandage off completely. But it was not the same. He could not look at me without that proposal sitting between us like a third person at the table. Every time I said I was going to hang out with friends or study late, I saw the question in his eyes. Is she changing her mind? Is she pulling away? The relationship turned into this slow, painful countdown that we were both pretending not to hear. Eventually, I was the one who said out loud what we both already knew, that it was not working, that we were too young and wanted different things right now. He cried, I cried, my mother cried, my middle sister looked like she was attending a funeral she had not approved. My brother and I went through a tense phase where he accused me of throwing away something solid for no good reason. It took time for him to see that staying would have been worse for everybody. We patched things up slowly, mostly because we had always been close before and neither of us wanted to lose that. My middle sister, though, she never really let it go. She treated the breakup like a personal betrayal of some script she had already written in her head. Every time his name came up, she would make comments about how he was the good one, and I was too picky. Then she started dating his brother. At first, I thought I was mishearing things. My mother mentioned it casually, like it was just some cute coincidence that my middle sister and my ex's brother had been spending more time together. I honestly thought it was a joke. Out of all the people in our town, out of all the possible partners, she went for his brother. She framed it as this natural thing, saying that they had always gotten along when he came over, that they had chemistry, and that they just clicked now that they were both single and adults. Every word out of her mouth felt like someone scraping a fork across a plate inside my head. I tried to be civil. I told myself that adults date adults and that I did not own anyone. I reminded myself that I was the one who had ended the relationship, and that technically nobody was crossing any official lines. But there is a difference between what is technically allowed and what is emotionally decent, and she kept acting like the difference did not exist. When they announced they were officially together, my mother looked torn between discomfort and excitement. My father pretended it was fine. My brother was just tired. I told them all that I could handle it as long as nobody tried to make me interact with my ex. Of course, that lasted for about 5 minutes. My siblings have this habit of turning everything into group activities, so even after the breakup, they kept inviting my ex to family gatherings. He had been basically living at our house for years, so in their minds, excluding him felt more awkward than including him, even if it meant putting me in a room with my ex and his new connection to my sister. At first, I tolerated it. I made polite small talk when necessary. I stayed on the opposite side of the room when I could, and I told myself that I was being mature. I did not want to be the dramatic one, even though inside I was screaming. The problem was not just his presence. It was my middle sister and her little games. She acted like we were all part of this romantic comedy she was scripting. She would say things like, "Look at us, still one big happy group," or, "Some people just cannot deny fate," and she would give me this look like she was waiting for me to laugh and agree. She would nudge me when my ex walked into a room, whispering things about how sad he looked and how obvious it was that he still loved me. She made jokes about how we were basically family now, no matter what I did. Every gathering felt like sitting in a room full of people who were pretending this whole setup was cute instead of deeply uncomfortable. As the years rolled on, the lines got blurrier. My ex came on family trips, holidays, even small weekend barbecues. The excuse was always the same. He and my brother were still close. He and my middle sister were in a serious relationship. It would be weird to exclude him. I tried to speak up a few times, saying that maybe it would be nice to have some events where he was not invited, but I got the same responses every time. My mother would say she did not want to take sides. My father would tell me that avoiding someone forever was not realistic, and my middle sister would accuse me of being childish. She kept telling me that I needed to move on, while she was the one dragging my past into every single family moment. Around that time, I decided I needed a change of scenery that did not include any of them. I worked hard in school, applied for a study program abroad through my university, and got accepted for a semester in another country. It was the first time I had done something big that was completely mine. Nobody else in my family had pushed me toward it. Nobody else had been part of the application. I packed my bags, got on a plane, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was stepping into a version of my life that was not already written by someone else. That is where I met the man who would become my husband. He was also from the United States, but from a different state. There on the same program, just trying to escape his own messy family dynamics for a while. We met at a boring orientation event where everyone was jet-lagged and pretending to be more interested in cultural slideshows than they actually were. We ended up sitting next to each other and started trading sarcastic comments about the schedule, and it felt easy in a way that did not scare me. There was no history, no parents watching, no siblings hovering, just two strangers making each other laugh in a room full of strangers. We started spending more time together because it felt natural, not because anyone else had forced circumstances. We explored the city on the weekends, got lost more times than I will admit, and had long conversations about everything from childhood regrets to what we wanted out of life. It was intense, but it was not suffocating. He did not talk about forever in a way that pinned me down. He talked about it like something we could choose if it continued to make sense. When the semester ended and we had to go back home, we looked at each other at the airport and decided that breaking up just because of geography would be the stupidest thing after everything we had shared. So we did the long-distance thing. It was not glamorous. It meant late-night video calls when one of us was half asleep, saving up for plane tickets, and memorizing each other's schedules so we did not wake the other person up with a call at the wrong time. But it also meant I finally had a relationship that existed outside of my family bubble. My parents knew he existed, of course, but they were not part of the origin story. My middle sister could not hijack the narrative because she had not been there when it started. That alone made it feel sacred. After about a year, we both admitted that living in separate states was slowly killing us. He found a job opportunity near where I lived, and I found myself actually excited at the idea of building a daily routine with someone. When he moved, my parents met him properly and liked him immediately. In that cautious way parents like someone when they can tell their child is serious this time. My brother approved after one long conversation on the porch. My middle sister, predictably, had opinions. From the moment she met him, she treated our relationship like some kind of silly phase. She kept calling him my study abroad crush, like we were teenagers who had met on a school trip. Whenever his name came up, she would say things like, "Well, we will see where that goes," in that fake neutral tone that is anything but neutral. When we announced that we were officially engaged a year later, she smiled in front of everyone, but did not hug me. Later that night, she pulled me aside and asked if I was sure I was not just rebounding from my first relationship. I stared at her like she was speaking another language. My ex had been out of my life as anything more than an awkward family presence for years at that point. But in her mind, he was still my baseline. My mother tried to calm things down by saying there was no rush to plan the wedding, that we could take our time. She said it gently, but I could hear it. She had never really let go of the idea that my ex was the right one for me. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. I started learning that just because the people around you love you does not mean they see you clearly. Sometimes they fall in love with a version of you that is convenient for their own fantasies, and then punish you quietly when you refuse to act it out. Eventually, I had enough. I told my middle sister that if she kept making snide comments about my fiancé, I would stop inviting her to anything involving us. She laughed it off at first, like I was being dramatic, but I meant it. I told her that my relationship was not some group project for her to fix or redirect. I told my parents that if they wanted a real relationship with me as an adult, they had to stop treating me like my life choices were auditions for their approval. My middle sister, being who she is, did not back off. She decided to turn her wedding into a performance, and unfortunately for me, I was cast in a role I did not agree to. She had been planning her wedding to my ex's brother for what felt like forever, and she asked me to be her main bridesmaid. I said yes, because walking away entirely at that point felt like dropping a bomb in the middle of everything. I thought I could survive one day, even if the whole thing already felt like a twisted joke. During the rehearsal, I realized just how twisted it was. The planner started lining people up and casually mentioned that I would be walking down the aisle with my ex. I froze. I looked over at my middle sister, and she had this tiny smile on her face, like she had been waiting for me to notice. When I confronted her later, she shrugged and said it made sense because the pairs had to be balanced and it was not a big deal. She said that since I was engaged, nobody would get the wrong idea. She slid that part in with this fake innocence that made me want to scream. The day of the wedding was, unsurprisingly, a disaster for my mental health. I spent the whole ceremony feeling like I was stuck in some nightmare where every choice I had made was being questioned in slow motion. My ex kept trying to make small talk, saying things like, "It is funny, right?" Which it deeply was not. I got through the ceremony by dissociating so hard I barely remember the vows. At the reception, I realized my middle sister had done more than just mess with the processional. She had seated my fiancé at a table on the opposite side of the room, surrounded by her closest friends, while I was placed up at the head table next to her. When I pointed it out, she said she wanted me near her on her special day and that my fiancé would be fine meeting new people. One of her single friends immediately latched onto him, talking nonstop, leaning in too close, laughing too loudly at everything he said. It was not subtle. At one point, when I finally managed to walk over, I heard that friend say something like, "If you ever get bored, you should come out with us. We will show you how people have fun here." And my middle sister was watching from across the room with this satisfied expression like she had set a trap and was just waiting. By the end of the night, I was done. I barely made it through the obligatory speeches and the fake smiles for pictures. When my middle sister tried to pull me onto the dance floor for some sisterly moment, I pulled my arm away and told her I was leaving. She told me not to make a scene. I told her the scene had started the moment she decided to turn my fiancé into some sort of test of loyalty. We argued in a corner, hissing at each other between drinks and forced smiles, and I realized that whatever sisterhood we had left was hanging by a thread she had already cut. The next morning, I sat my parents down. I told them what had happened at the wedding from my side, not from the sanitized version my middle sister would definitely present. I told them about being paired with my ex, about the seating chart, about the flirting she had clearly orchestrated. I told them about every time she had undermined my fiancé and every time they had let it slide because it was just her being her. Then I told them the part that made my mother go completely silent. I was done. I told them I would not be speaking to my middle sister anymore. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not for quick check-ins. I said that if they tried to push reconciliation or invite me somewhere without telling me she would be there, I would walk out and it would be on them. My father looked shocked but also strangely relieved. My brother nodded slowly, like he had been waiting for someone else to say it first. My mother started crying immediately, asking how I could do that to family. I reminded her that my middle sister had been doing things to me for years, and nobody had asked her that question. I said I was done being the flexible one, the accommodating one, the one who swallowed discomfort so everyone else could keep pretending we were normal. I left their house that day feeling both guilty and lighter than I had in a long time. It was not some grand liberation. It was more like finally letting myself name something that had been rotting for years. The silence that followed was shocking even to me. For 6 full years, my middle sister and I did not speak. Not a text, not a birthday message, not even a comment on a picture on some social media app. At family events where we both had to be there, we became experts at pretending the other did not exist. I would walk into a room, say hello to everyone except her, sit at the opposite end of the table, and carry on. She did the same. It was petty and cold and strangely peaceful. Finally, I was not being cornered into interactions I did not want. My mother hated it. She tried a few small stunts in the beginning, like inviting me over and forgetting to mention that my middle sister was there, but I caught on quickly. One time I showed up and saw my middle sister's car in the driveway. I backed out immediately and drove away. Later, my mother called crying, accusing me of humiliating her in front of my sister. I repeated my boundary, word for word. After that, she found more subtle ways to sabotage it, but the message was clear. She thought I was being cruel for protecting myself. My father and my brother, on the other hand, respected my decision. They did not pretend it was ideal, but they did not push reconciliation. My brother slowly drifted from my ex as well, keeping things polite when they crossed paths, but no longer inviting him into every part of his life. It took him a while to admit it, but he eventually confessed that watching how my middle sister and my ex handled things had changed how he saw both of them. Life moved on in the way it always does when you are not constantly picking at wounds. My husband and I got married in a small ceremony that did not involve complicated seating charts or hidden agendas. My parents came. My middle sister did not. I did not invite her, and my mother chose to come anyway, though I could see the conflict written all over her face. For a while after that, things were strangely calm. We built a life. We worked. We paid rent and argued about small things like whose turn it was to do the dishes. We were boring in that comforting way that I had always wanted. The next big explosion came years later. On the day I told my family I was pregnant. We were at a little gathering for my mother's birthday. Nothing huge, just immediate family and a few cousins. I had been waiting for the right moment to share the news, and it felt like that was it. After we sang and she blew out her candles, I stood up and said there was something I wanted to say. My hands were shaking, but my voice was steady when I told them that my husband and I were expecting. My father smiled so wide I thought his face might split. My brother cheered. My mother covered her mouth with her hands and started crying. My middle sister, though, did something different. She smiled, but it was off, tight and brief, gone almost before it arrived. She clapped slowly, said something polite like, "That is great news," and then excused herself to go to the bathroom. Maybe someone else would have missed it, but I know her. I saw the way her jaw clenched, the way her eyes flicked to my stomach and then away as if it offended her. I tried not to let it ruin my moment. I told myself she could feel however she wanted from whatever distance she had chosen. A few days later, my mother invited me over for what she called a tea afternoon, just the two of us. She said she wanted to talk about the baby and look at tiny clothes online and reminisce about when she had been pregnant. I had a weird feeling in my chest that I tried to ignore. I wanted to believe she was just excited and not planning something else, because believing otherwise made me feel like I was paranoid. I went anyway, telling myself that if anything felt off when I got there, I could always leave. The second I pulled up and saw my middle sister's car in front of the house, that weird feeling turned into full-body dread. I almost put the car in reverse right then, but I told myself that maybe my middle sister was just dropping something off and leaving. That tiny sliver of hope evaporated the moment I walked through the door and saw a whole group already gathered in the living room. My middle sister was there, obviously. So was her husband. My ex was sitting on the couch. His mother was there too. My mother stood in the middle of them all, clasping her hands like she had just assembled a panel. I turned around and reached for the door, but my mother rushed over and gently grabbed my arm. She said my name in that pleading tone I had grown to hate and asked me to just hear them out. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my neck. I looked at my ex, who at least had the decency to look embarrassed, and at his mother, who looked offended on principle. My middle sister had tears in her eyes already, like she had been rehearsing this performance in the mirror. They called it an intervention. That is the word my middle sister used, like I was some out-of-control addict instead of a pregnant woman who had simply cut off a toxic sibling. My ex started talking first, saying he wanted to apologize for not respecting my boundaries in the past, but that he thought I was going too far now. He said I was holding on to old wounds and punishing people who loved me. His mother chimed in, saying that my middle sister had only ever wanted what was best for me, that she had tried to set up situations where I could follow my heart. My middle sister read from a letter she had written, because of course she did. She talked about how much she missed me, how she thought about me every day, how she wanted our children to know each other. Then she slipped into blaming language, saying that I was being stubborn, that I was breaking our mother's heart, that I was choosing my husband over my family. She cried openly and dramatically, and I watched my mother soak it all in like it was proof that she had been right all along. My husband was not there yet because I had not expected to be walking into an ambush, but my phone was in my pocket. While they talked at me, I texted him and my brother with shaking hands, telling them I needed them to come right away. I did not argue. I did not yell. I just sat there on the edge of the chair, listening to people who had spent years ignoring my clearly stated boundaries tell me that the real problem was my lack of forgiveness. My mother read her own letter too. It was all about how she was caught in the middle, how she loved all her children, how she could not bear to see us divided. Then she went further. She said that if I continued to refuse to reconcile with my middle sister, she did not know how she could be part of my life going forward. She said she did not want to be forced to choose between her daughters. The irony of saying that in front of a whole group she had chosen to assemble against me was not lost on me. When my brother and my husband walked in, the whole room shifted. My brother took one look at me and then at them, and his face went red in a way I have only seen a few times in my life. My husband came straight to my side, put his hand on my shoulder, and asked calmly what was going on. My middle sister tried to explain first, launching into some speech about family unity. My brother cut her off. He asked my mother point blank if she had really organized an ambush for her pregnant daughter with people she knew I had cut contact with. She started crying again, saying she did not mean it to be an ambush, that she thought if we were all in the same room, we could talk it out. My brother told her that she had been warned repeatedly not to pull stunts like this. He told my middle sister that whatever sympathy he had left for her was gone. My husband did not raise his voice. That almost made it scarier. He looked at each person and said that my boundaries were not up for debate, that my mental and physical health were not group discussion topics. He said that we were leaving and that anyone who wanted a relationship with us and our baby would have to start with accepting that. My middle sister tried to guilt him, saying he did not understand our history. He said he understood enough. We left. I shook the whole drive home. My husband kept one hand on my knee and the other on the steering wheel, and I stared out the window trying not to throw up from a mix of stress and early pregnancy nausea. When we got back, he called a lawyer. Not because he wanted to sue anyone or drag things into a courtroom, but because he wanted to document what had happened in case it escalated. I hated that it had come to that, but I also felt a tiny bit safer knowing we were not just relying on wishful thinking anymore. The lawyer listened, took notes, and recommended a formal letter telling everyone present at that intervention not to contact me anymore. He said we could include language about potential legal steps if they ignored it. It sounded intense, but so had watching my sister break every boundary I had ever set. We agreed. The letter went out to my middle sister, her husband, my ex, his mother, and, painfully, to my own mother. My father and my brother were obviously not included. They were on my side now, in a way they had not been able to manage when I was younger. My father did something that surprised everyone. He moved out of the house he shared with my mother and came to stay with my brother for a while. He told her he could not live in a place where setting up ambushes for their pregnant daughter was considered an acceptable solution to emotional discomfort. It was like all the years of her ignoring boundaries and playing favorites had finally added up to a number he could not pretend was 0. My mother, predictably, spun the story to anyone who would listen. She told extended family members that my husband was controlling me, that he had turned me against my own blood. My middle sister took to a social media app with vague posts about toxic people and chosen family that were clearly aimed at me. Some mutual friends reached out trying to get both sides, and I told them the bare minimum. If they believed me, fine. If they did not, that was also information. After a while, the noise died down. Not because anyone had learned a profound lesson, but because people get bored when you do not keep feeding them drama. My husband and I focused on my pregnancy. It was not easy. The stress had done a number on my body. My doctor warned me that my blood pressure was too high and that I needed to avoid stress as much as possible. I laughed, because what else was I supposed to do? Cry in the exam room and explain how the people who were supposed to support me were the ones making things dangerous? For a few weeks, things were quiet. Then my middle sister found a new line to cross. One evening, I came home from an appointment and noticed that the front door was locked, but something felt off inside the house. Just a weird hum in the air that made my skin prickle. My husband was not home yet. I walked through each room slowly, my heart racing, checking to see if anything was out of place. I told myself I was just paranoid until I walked into the nursery. Some of the gifts we had gotten from my father and my brother were moved, not drastically, but just enough that I knew someone else had been in the room. I went cold. I called my husband and told him I thought someone had been in the house. He told me to get out immediately and wait in the car. When he got home, we did another sweep together, and that is when we found the note on the kitchen counter. It was written in my middle sister's handwriting. She had written a long, rambling letter about how she could not bear being shut out of my life and her future niece's life. She apologized and then, in the same breath, said she thought I was overreacting and that one day I would thank her for not giving up. Turns out she had called the woman who sometimes cleaned our place and lied about an emergency, saying she had forgotten medication at our house and needed to get in quickly. The cleaner, who had no idea about our family drama, believed her and came over to unlock the door for her. When we talked to the cleaner later, she apologized over and over, but I could not blame her. She had been lied to by someone who knew exactly which buttons to push. That incident pushed everything into another gear. We called the lawyer again. This time, it was not just about a letter. It was about trespassing and harassment. The lawyer said that if it continued, we could request a protective order. The thought of standing in front of a judge and explaining my own sister's behavior made me feel sick, but the thought of doing nothing felt worse. I could not pretend this was just annoying anymore. I was pregnant. Someone who refused to accept no as an answer had let herself into my house without my consent. My father and my brother were furious. My father confronted my mother, who tried to say she had not known about the break-in. Maybe she had not known the exact method, but she had certainly known how far my middle sister was willing to go. He told her that if she kept enabling this behavior, he would file for divorce. She thought he was bluffing. He was not. We took practical steps too. We changed the locks, installed cameras, and made sure the cleaner knew that under no circumstances was anyone allowed in without our explicit permission. It felt ridiculous and heartbreaking to be treating my own family like a threat. But that is exactly what they had become. Loving someone does not erase the reality of how their actions affect you. The final straw, the one that pushed everything into permanent territory, happened in a parking lot. My husband, my father, and my brother had gone to help my father move some of his things out of the house he had shared with my mother. They were loading boxes into my brother's car when my middle sister showed up. She walked straight up to them, ignoring the tension in the air, and asked if they were really going to abandon our mother and her just because I was too sensitive to handle conflict. My father told her that nobody was abandoning anyone. He said that he was done pretending that her behavior was just sister drama, when it had escalated into harassment. She rolled her eyes and said everyone was being dramatic and that all of this could go away if I just agreed to talk to her. My brother told her that she had burned that bridge herself and that nobody owed her another chance to set it on fire again. She said something about how one day I would regret cutting family out. Maybe that will be true. Maybe someday, in some quiet moment, I will feel a pang for the version of a sister I never had. But regret about holding the line with the version of her I actually have? No, I do not see that happening. Eventually, we went ahead with filing for a protective order. We did not want drama. We wanted distance. We gathered the letters, the text messages, the note from the day she broke into the house, statements from the cleaner, and a summary of the so-called intervention. Standing in that small courtroom, with a judge flipping through papers that summarized years of pain in a handful of paragraphs, I felt exposed and weirdly numb. My middle sister did not look at me once. My mother cried the entire time. Her tears used to move me. They did not anymore. The order was granted. It covered me, my husband, and our child once she was born. It meant my middle sister could not come near our home, my work, or any place she knew I frequented. It meant she could not contact me directly or through other people. It did not magically fix everything that had happened, but it gave me what my family had refused to give for years: enforced space. Not long after that, my father filed for divorce. He said he had stayed longer than he should have because he believed that people settled into their flaws as they aged, and he could live with my mother's. Watching her protect my middle sister's ego over our safety changed that calculation. He said quietly in our kitchen one night that he wished he had listened to me earlier. I told him that all I cared about was that he was listening now. My ex, for his part, finally faced consequences that had nothing to do with me directly. Word got around about the intervention and his role in it. People started to notice patterns in how he behaved in other areas of his life. Eventually, he lost his job after it came out that he had used work resources to track down contact information for someone I had cut off. Do I feel bad about that? No. Actions have consequences. He chose his. My mother and my middle sister ended up very isolated. The extended family members who had initially backed them quietly backed away when they realized this was not a simple misunderstanding. Some friends stopped dropping by. Some stopped calling. My mother still sends messages sometimes, through my father or my brother, saying that she misses me, that she misses her granddaughter. I believe that she does. I also believe that she still sees herself as the victim in all this. My daughter was born surrounded by people who actually respect boundaries. My brother was in the waiting room. My father cried when he held her. My husband looked at her like his heart had moved outside his body. There were no surprise visitors, no hidden agendas, no one trying to turn that moment into a redemption arc for themselves. It was just us. Sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet and my daughter is finally asleep after acting like her crib was made of lava for hours, I think about the family I thought I had when I was 16. I thought we were close. I thought we were safe. I thought we all wanted what was best for each other. Now I know that sometimes what people call best for you is just best for their version of your life. When I tell this story, like I am telling it to you now, I hear the little voice in my head that sounds like my mother asking if I am sure it is not too harsh. And then I remember sitting in that living room surrounded by people who believed they had the right to decide what my healing should look like. I remember walking into my own house and realizing my sister had been in my baby's room without my permission. I remember the judge's voice granting the order that should never have been necessary. There is still grief tucked in there, under the anger and the relief. I miss the idea of having a sister more than I miss her. I miss the fantasy of a mother who would have seen the line my sister crossed and pulled her back instead of grabbing her hand and jumping with her. But I do not miss the constant tightness in my chest, the exhaustion of explaining my boundaries over and over just to have them ignored. So, no, this is not a story where everyone makes up in the end and cries and hugs in some dramatic holiday reunion. This is a story where I chose my own sanity and my child's safety over keeping the peace at any cost. The cost was too high. The peace was never real. And if that makes me the villain in other people's stories, then fine. At least in mine. I finally get to be the one holding the pen. What I do not usually say out loud, at least not in the same dramatic way I tell the rest of the story, is that life after all of this has been a mix of very normal days and very heavy conversations. Not some magical new chapter where everything suddenly makes sense. I started therapy a few months after my daughter was born. Not the cute, aesthetic kind people post about online, but the real kind where you sit on a boring couch and talk about things you swore you were done thinking about. In one session, my therapist asked me about the first time I remember feeling like my needs were less important than my middle sister's. I told her about being a kid, standing in our shared bedroom while my middle sister held up my favorite shirt and said it looked better on her, and how my mother walked in and told me to stop being selfish and let my sister take it because she had a birthday party to go to, and I did not. I felt ridiculous even saying it out loud. It sounded small compared to everything that came later, but while I was talking, I could feel that same old heat in my cheeks and that same stupid shame. My therapist just nodded and said, pretty calmly, that it made sense my body still reacted that way when people tried to push past my boundaries now, because it had been trained for years to believe that saying no made me the problem. It was not some deep revelation with dramatic music, but it was the first time I really saw how many times I had been told to move aside so someone else could be comfortable. My husband came with me to a couple of sessions, not because he was the issue, but because he wanted to understand how to support me without accidentally repeating my parents' patterns. He told the therapist that every time I tried to hold a boundary, even a small one, I would flinch like I was waiting to be punished. Hearing him say that out loud was rough. It made me realize how much my body still expected a fight every time I did something as simple as not answering a message right away. Meanwhile, my mother did what she always does, and rewrote the story in her head. Through relatives, I heard that in her version, my husband is some controlling mastermind, and I am a weak, brainwashed woman who turned her back on her family. Apparently, that plays better at her coffee gatherings than the boring truth that I was just done being the family doormat. One of my aunts called me once, trying to play peacemaker. She started with that soft voice people use when they are about to guilt trip you. She said things like, "Your mother is hurting," and "Maybe now that you have a child, you can find it in your heart to let this go." I told her that my heart had nothing to do with it anymore. This was about safety and sanity. I said that my mother could be hurting and still not be someone I let into my house. My aunt made a little shocked sound and said she had never known me to be so cold. I reminded her that for most of my life I had been the exact opposite, and look where that had gotten me. My brother and I got closer in a way I did not fully expect. One night, after my daughter was finally asleep, we were sitting on my back porch and he said he needed to tell me something. He admitted that back when we were teenagers, he knew our mother was unfair to me sometimes, but he did not want to push back because it would have made things messy with his best friend and with our middle sister. He said he was sorry for not stepping in more. I did not give him some big speech. I just told him I appreciated him saying it out loud and that it did matter, even if it did not change what had already happened. Since then, I have watched him start setting his own boundaries too, in smaller ways. He does not drop everything anymore when our mother calls. He does not let our middle sister drag him into long rants about me. It is strange and healing and a little sad to see all the little places where we could have stood up for ourselves sooner but did not. My father followed through on what he said as well. The divorce from my mother was not dramatic in a movie way, just slow and exhausting. For a while, he split his time between the house and a small place near my brother. After a few months, he moved out for good. The divorce was finalized less than a year later. He visits us often now, comes to my daughter's school events, helps my husband fix little things around the house. Sometimes when he is here, he will look around and say something like, "It is peaceful here," and I can tell he is still getting used to it. As for my middle sister and her husband, they are still together as far as I know. The family grapevine says their relationship has been rocky for years, and they have been to more than one counselor. None of that is my business anymore. After the protective order was granted, my middle sister actually respected it. No late-night calls, no surprise visits, no cousins showing up with messages from her. For the first time in my life, she was forced to stay on her side of a line. The order covered my ex as well. He tried once to get around it by emailing people we knew in common, asking them to pass messages along. Someone at his job overheard him bragging about using his work email to track down contact information. They reported it. His company looked into it, saw what he had been doing, and let him go. I did not celebrate when I heard about it, but I also did not feel sorry for him. Actions, consequences. Simple as that. My daughter is old enough now to notice that our family setup looks different from some of her friends. She has asked why my husband has 2 parents who visit and I only have 1. I tell her the truth in small pieces. I say that some people, even family, do not always know how to act in a way that is kind or safe, and that when grown-ups keep hurting other people, sometimes the healthiest thing to do is love them from far away or not at all. She usually nods, thinks about it quietly, and then asks what is for dinner. Every once in a while, something will remind me of my mother or my middle sister. A random smell, a phrase my daughter uses, a holiday that used to be loud and crowded. I still get a lump in my throat sometimes when I see those big family photos people post. All smiles and matching outfits. For a second, I feel that old, familiar sting of, why could we not be that? Then my daughter yells from the other room asking where her favorite socks are. My husband walks in with takeout. My father texts to say he got home safe, and I remember that the small circle we have now is not a consolation prize. It is the point. If you are waiting for me to say I am completely healed and nothing hurts anymore, that is not how this works. There are still days when I second-guess myself, when a voice in the back of my head whispers that maybe I was too harsh or dramatic. On those days, I go back to the facts, to the note left in my kitchen, to the ambush at my mother's house, to my sister breaking into my home while I was pregnant, to the look on my husband's face when he realized how far they were willing to go. And then I look at my daughter playing on the living room floor, completely safe from all of that chaos. And I remember why I drew the line in the first place. My job is not to keep my mother comfortable or to save my middle sister from the consequences of her behavior. My job is to protect the little family I built and to teach my daughter that love does not mean letting people walk all over you. It has been 5 years since the protective order. My daughter is 5 now, loud and curious and full of questions. She knows she has one grandmother who shows up for her and another one who does not. When she asks why, I tell her that some grown-ups make choices that mean they cannot be part of our lives, and that it is okay to feel sad about that and still be happy with the people we do have. Sometimes I still feel that old urge to fix it all, to call my mother and my middle sister and offer them one more chance. Then I remember how many chances they already had. I remember how small I used to feel in rooms they controlled. I remember promising myself, sitting on my kitchen floor after that intervention, pregnant and shaking, that if I got the chance to raise this child in peace, I was not going to waste it. So no, I did not get the tidy movie ending where everybody apologizes and we all hug under twinkly lights while the credits roll. What I got instead was a quiet house where nobody is scheming behind my back, a partner who believes me the first time I say something is wrong, a brother who finally learned how to stand up for himself, and a father who chose to stop standing on the sidelines. If that makes me the villain in my mother and my middle sister's version of the story, so be it. I would rather be their villain than keep playing the role they wrote for me. Around here in this little life I have now, I am not the difficult one or the ungrateful one or the dramatic one. I am just the woman who finally decided that her own peace and her daughter's were worth more than keeping other people comfortable. A little while after we settled into this new normal, my daughter came home from school with one of those family tree projects. You know, the kind, big piece of paper, boxes for parents and grandparents, and sometimes even great-grandparents if the teacher is ambitious. She spread it out on the kitchen table like it was a treasure map. She had filled in her own name, my husband's, his parents', my father. One box in the corner was still empty. She tapped it with her marker and said, very seriously, "This is for your other mom, right?" I felt that familiar tightness in my chest, but I sat down next to her and picked up another marker just to have something in my hand. "Yes," I said. "That is where my mother would go." She looked up at me. "Can we draw her?" For a second, I thought about saying no, about telling her to leave it blank, but that felt like another kind of lie. So I nodded. "We can draw her. She is part of the story, even if she is not part of our life right now." My daughter started sketching a simple little stick figure with curly hair. "Does she know I exist?" she asked. "She knows," I said. "She met you once, when you were very tiny. Why does she not visit?" That one came out softer. I took a breath. "Because she made choices that were very hurtful and very unsafe. And because my job is to keep you safe, sometimes that means not letting certain people come over, even if they are family. She thought about that for a minute, chewing on the end of her marker. So she broke the rules? Pretty much, I said. She kept breaking the rules, even after we told her to stop. My daughter nodded like she was filing that away somewhere in her mind. Then she drew a little line from the stick figure to my box and wrote, "Mom's mom," under it in shaky handwriting. "There," she said. "Now it is honest." There have been other small moments like that. A school event where the teacher asks for all the grandparents to stand, and my daughter turns to my father and my husband's parents and waves like they are celebrities. Holiday concerts where other kids have a whole row of relatives, and we have a small but loud section. I used to worry she would feel like she was missing something. So far, she mostly seems proud of the people who actually show up. One summer, we had a cookout in the backyard. Nothing fancy, just a small grill, mismatched plates. My brother chasing my daughter with a water gun while my husband pretended not to see her sneaking extra chips. My father was sitting in one of those folding chairs that always look like they are about to collapse, but somehow never do. At one point, when the chaos had calmed down a little, my father waved me over. "I need to say something," he said. He looked nervous in a way I had not seen since the divorce hearings. I sat down on the cooler across from him. "Okay, that sounds ominous." He smiled a little. "I just keep thinking about how long I stayed quiet, about how many times I watched your mother brush you off to keep your sister happy, about how often I told myself it was not my place to interfere." I stared at him, waiting. He cleared his throat. "I cannot change any of that. I know that. But I want you to know that leaving that house, filing for divorce, choosing to stand with you and your brother, that was not me being noble. That was me finally doing what I should have done a long time ago." I felt my eyes burn. "You did not have to say that," I told him. "I did," he said. "Because if your daughter ever looks back and asks why things happened the way they did, I want you to be able to tell her that at least one of her grandparents eventually got it together." I laughed, wiped my face with the back of my hand, and told him that counted for a lot. Because it does. It does not erase what came before, but it changes the way the story lands in my head. Every now and then, an unknown number pops up on my phone with the area code from my hometown. I used to freeze every time, heart racing, mind jumping straight to worst-case scenarios. Now, most of the time, I simply press decline and go back to whatever I was doing. If it is important, whoever it is can leave a message. They never do. There was one message, a couple of years back, from a cousin I was never very close to. She said my middle sister had shown up at a family gathering and cried about how much she missed me, about how I had shut her out, about how she did not understand what she had done that was so unforgivable. My cousin said she thought I should know. I listened to the voicemail once and then deleted it. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. I know exactly what she did. I am done pretending it was a mystery. That is the thing nobody really tells you about going no contact. People act like it is this one dramatic moment, a big speech, a slammed door. In reality, it is a series of small decisions, over and over. Not answering a message, not showing up to a gathering, not asking for an update, choosing the quiet evening at home over the loud room where you are always the problem. Sometimes I miss the idea of having a big extended family. I miss the fantasy of cousins growing up together every weekend, of noisy holidays, of having a mother I could call when my daughter does something that scares me or makes me proud. I grieve that version of my life even though I am not sure it ever really existed. But then there are mornings when my daughter climbs into our bed and snuggles between me and my husband, hair a wild mess, breath warm and sleepy, and she says something simple like, "I like our house," and it hits me how much peace we fought for without even realizing it at the time. We are not perfect parents. I lose my patience sometimes. My husband forgets things I tell him. We argue about stupid stuff like who left the wet towel on the bed. But there is no one in our daily orbit who is actively trying to tear us down from the inside. There is no person whose approval we have to chase at the expense of our own sanity. If you asked me now whether I would do it all again, knowing exactly how much it would cost, I would still say yes. Not because it was easy, or because I enjoy being the villain in someone else's family legend, but because the alternative would have been spending the rest of my life shrinking myself to fit into a role that was slowly killing me. This version of my life is not flashy. There are no big reconciliations, no dramatic hospital bedside apologies, no speeches at weddings where everything is forgiven. There is just a steady, quiet kind of safety that I did not realize I was allowed to want when I was younger. In the end, that is the real twist in this whole story. Not that my middle sister turned out to be exactly as selfish as I always suspected. Not that my mother chose her image over her daughter. Not even that my father finally left. The real twist is that I finally believed myself. I believed my own memory of events, my own feelings, my own sense that something was wrong. And once you start believing yourself like that, it gets a lot harder for other people to convince you to walk back into the fire just because they are cold.